If you like what I do, please consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't done so already, join the Patreon page, and purchase something from one of my online stores. Every little bit helps. Thank you. As the Battle of Peebles Farm was wrapping up, Benjamin Butler and the Army of the James was still north of the James River, following their success at capturing New Market Heights. The advance westward by the 9th and 5th Corps was working in conjunction with Butler's offensive, but each one seemed to have stalled out. Butler, successful in the initial phase of his expedition, now became cautious, writing to General-in-Chief Ulysses S. Grant that he feared troops from Petersburg had moved across the river to confront him. He informed Grant that Henry Heath and Cadmus Wilcox's division from Hill's Corps were now in his front. Grant became frustrated because from George Meade's correspondence from the far left flank at Petersburg identified Heath and Wilcox's troops were in front of the 9th and 5th Corps and sent copies of those reports to Butler. Still, Butler was hesitant to press toward Richmond. Amid this lull in combat north of the James, Robert E. Lee offered to exchange prisoners man for man. Grant asked Lee if those troops included the black troops captured during the latest fight at New Market Heights. Lee responded that he intended to include all captured soldiers of the United States of whatever nation and color under my control, then added, "Deserters from our service and blacks belonging to our citizens are not considered subjects of exchange and were not included in my proposition. If there are any such among those stated by you to have been captured around Richmond, they cannot be returned." Grant then terminated the discussions. The government is bound to secure to all persons received into her armies the rights due to soldiers. This being denied by you in the persons of such men as have escaped from Southern masters induces me to decline making the exchanges you ask. Irritated about the loss of ground north of the James River, Lee called together his commanders in that sector, including Richard Ewell, the head of the Department of Richmond, Richard Anderson, the acting 1st Corps commander, 2 division commanders, Robert Hoke and Charles Field, Martin Gary, the head of the local cavalry brigade, and Edward Porter Alexander, the senior artilleryman. Surprisingly, another person joined the group of men, President Jefferson Davis. He had just returned from the Army of Tennessee outside of Atlanta, following the loss of that city to Union forces under William T. Sherman. Lee laid out his plan for knocking Butler back across the river in this meeting. Hoke and Field's infantry would come out of Richmond's fortifications, with Ewell's inexperienced troops taking their place. With the cavalry on their left flank, the 2 divisions would move down the Darbytown road, turn the flank of the Union Army, and drive it against the James River. At 6 a.m. on October 7th, the brigades of Hoke and Field, supervised by Anderson, advanced toward the Union right flank. When the rebels hit the Federal cavalry, the blue-coated soldiers put up a stiff resistance, more than Field was expecting. The Yankees took deliberate aim at the advancing enemy, resulting in multiple casualties. 200 of John Bratton's South Carolinians, dismayed by the accuracy of the Federals, threw down their weapons and began yelling that they were deserters and running toward the Union line. Their comrades began to shoot them in the back, which prompted them to pick up their rifles and continue the advance. The Federal cavalry were driven back toward Deep Bottom and the main Union line. The horsemen brought word of a major Confederate attack, but a few hours passed before anything happened. Field claimed that the delay came from him thinking Hoke was to follow up on this initial success, but it was probably a combination of that and the rough terrain making it difficult for Field to coordinate his brigades. It was after 9 a.m. before Field's men were in place to launch their main assault. Field wasn't able to coordinate his brigades properly, and Bratton and Dudley Du Bois' brigades attacked first, coming under a withering fire from Spencer repeating rifles and musketry that significantly thinned their ranks. Pinckney Bowles' brigade drifted away from the fight, and George Anderson's brigade made almost no progress. The fight was brutal for those who did engage. Bowles' brigade finally got on track and attacked the flank of the Union position, but they were blocked by Union reinforcements. Finally, Hood's Old Texas Brigade, led by John Gregg, led their own attack against the enemy, unsupported. The men got entangled in the abattis and fallen timber, making it difficult to close in on the enemy. One soldier remembered, "The enemy held their fire until we were within 150 yards of them, when 2 ranks arose and fired. As they went down, the other 2 ranks arose and fired, and so on. The brigade went on by jerks and spurts, climbing logs, pushing our way through brush and fallen timber, but an individual coming the same route 5 minutes afterward could have walked upon the mangled corpses of our boys. The brigade lost a lot of men that day, including its commander, John Gregg. Gregg was born in Alabama, but moved to Texas as a young man. He gained some political power and was part of the Texas Secession Convention. Gregg briefly served in the Confederate Congress before resigning his seat to return to Texas and raise a regiment of men. During the war, he was captured at Fort Donelson, took part in the Vicksburg Campaign, and the Battle of Chickamauga. When he recovered from his Chickamauga wound, he was transferred east to take command of Hood's old brigade. Gregg fought in the Overland Campaign with distinction and led his men against Butler's troops when he was shot in the neck and died nearly instantly. He was 36 years old. With their commander dead, command went to Frederick Bass, but he fell wounded, so Lieutenant Colonel Clinton Winkler of the 4th Texas took command. A few men asked permission if they could retrieve Gregg's body. This was given, and in that rain of shot and shell where it seemed nothing could live, they ran, rolled his body on the blanket, and safely bore it to the rear when the brigade was withdrawn from the field. Union losses totaled 458, while the Confederacy's casualties didn't exceed 600. Still, it was a costly day to have gained nothing significant from the attacks. Although small compared to the other engagements during the siege, it represented the last time that Robert E. Lee would launch an offensive north of the James River. Field and Hoke returned to their original positions closer to Richmond and waited for orders to move forward again, or for the Union to attack their position. If you like what I do, please consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't done so already, join the Patreon page, and purchase something from one of my online stores. Every little bit helps. Thank you. Following the battle along the Darbytown and New Market roads on October 7th, a pause in hostilities came about in that sector north of the James River. But although there wasn't much fighting, there were incredible amounts of activity as each side attempted to improve upon their earthworks. One Union soldier commented, "The line we hold now is called the third line of defense around Richmond. She will soon fall. She can't hold out much longer." Along with building fortifications, a change in command took place within the Army of the James. David Birney, commander of the 10th Corps, would lead the army on sick leave, suffering from an illness. Birney was originally born in Huntsville, Alabama, to an abolitionist politician. Birney and his family would move multiple times, but settle in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. He studied law and practiced it in Philadelphia. When the war broke out, he quickly rose through the ranks, mostly due to politics rather than military merit. He fought in most of the campaigns in the Eastern Theater. Birney commanded a division in the 3rd Corps at Gettysburg, being minorly wounded, and following the reorganization of the Army of the Potomac, the 3rd Corps was dismantled, and its units and commanders dispersed throughout the remaining corps. Birney became a division commander in Winfield Scott Hancock's 2nd Corps, and performed good service in that role. During the Siege of Petersburg, Birney took command of the 10th Corps, leading it until his departure from the Army on sick leave, following the most recent battle along the Darbytown and New Market roads. It was a sick leave he would never return from. He would pass away a few days later on October 18th in Philadelphia. He was 39 years old. Alfred Terry, one of his division commanders, would take command of the corps in his absence. Being so close to the capital brought civilians to look over battlefields and field hospitals. It became such a common occurrence that one soldier wrote, "Even ladies with their babies and young children walk about and look at dead bodies with the most disgusting interest. I had always felt that the callousness of the men was the saddest feature of the war, but when women love to look on death and bloodshed, it is disgusting and repulsive." Edward Porter Alexander, commanding the Confederate artillery north of the James River, put forward a plan for a line of entrenchments further east along the New Market, Darbytown, and Charles City roads. The chief engineer agreed with Porter's plan, and Porter took it to Lee for confirmation. Lee liked it as well. Preparations began to construct this new line of works using slaves, troops, and impressed civilians. Porter would call the new entrenchments the most beautiful line of entrenchments which I saw during the whole war. Plans to attack those fortifications were thwarted by a flag of truce on October 12th, so Butler decided to launch an assault the next day, following the same attack plan. The troops were up and moving by 4 a.m., getting to their locations by 6 a.m. It was closer to 7 when the blue lines began to push the Confederate skirmishers at a slow pace. Terry encountered substantial resistance and told Butler at 10:30 a.m. that, "At present I think we cannot pierce their works except by massing on some point and attacking in column." Butler forwarded Terry's report to Grant, who replied, "The reconnaissance now serves to locate the Confederates for any future operations. To attack now, we would lose more than the enemy and only gain ground which we are not prepared to hold, nor are we prepared to follow up any advantage we might gain." With that, Butler sent a message to Terry to retire leisurely, as the main line had been located and lightly tested with skirmishers. Minor musketry and artillery fire rattled during that morning, but a significant casualty happened in Charles Field's division. His nephew, Willis F. Jones, on a mission to give a message to Joseph Walker of Bratton's brigade, was hit in the head by a sharpshooter's bullet. Field claimed that Jones's death was the saddest event of the war. He was put into a metallic coffin in Richmond and buried in Hollywood Cemetery. Field's quartermaster remarked, "It is particularly sad when Marylanders and Kentuckians are shot down here after fighting their own neighbors and friends, and then to be killed with no hope of ever having a lasting resting place among their own people." Robert E. Lee and Richard Anderson realized the precariousness of the Confederate left flank and moved Bowles' brigade to shore up that end of the line. Grant and Butler's orders to halt the advance hadn't reached Terry, who sent Pond's brigade northward in preparation for an attack to get through the fortifications. It took a couple hours for Pond to prepare his men, but his division commander, Adelbert Ames, was insistent on an attack, with his other brigades giving support and keeping the Confederates in their front busy. At 2 p.m., Pond's brigade attacked. One of the Yankees from Pond's command remembered, "As we made the assault through the brush, the air seeming filled with whizzing bullets, the scream of solid shot and shell, the rattle and sweep of grape and canister through our ranks. Comrades fell on our right and our left." The whole affair lasted about 10 minutes, with Pond taking heavy casualties and retiring from the field. Within that incredibly short amount of time, the brigade lost 14 killed and 191 wounded. The Confederates suffered between 30 and 80 casualties. Finally, word trickled down to Terry, Ames, and Pond that no attacks were to be made, and the whole force moved back to Deep Bottom. The Second Battle of Darbytown Road had come to an end. The whole 10th Corps lost 396 men in that engagement. The Confederacy crowed in their newspapers about a great victory won on the Darbytown Road, exaggerating the death toll of the Union. It was a victory, but not as large as the Confederacy bragged about. After this battle, Richard Anderson would no longer command the First Corps of the Army of Northern Virginia. Lee's old warhorse, James Longstreet, returned from his recuperation after suffering a severe wound at the Battle of the Wilderness in May. When the men saw him coming, they mounted the breastworks, and while he rode down the lines, made the welkin ring with cheers for the old bull of the woods, as they loved to designate him. Anderson would command a new corps, the Fourth Corps, which was in reality just one division of men.